can change.
Oh yeah, you chuckle. I don't think it's funny. I think it's disgusting.
Hello everyone! Welcome to the show. Thank you though. Thank you. I'm so glad to see everybody again. You know, I have a very exciting surprise for you today. But first, I just want to say that, you know, if I ever were to return to JW.org, and I know, it's okay, don't worry, I never will. I'm convinced that they don't have the truth, but just hypothetically speaking, if I ever were to return to this organization, there's two things, probably more, that I could never do again. One of them is I could never shun anybody. You know, to me, it's just such a disgusting manipulative process. And after having been there myself, you know, sometimes you got to learn the hard way. I now realize I could never do this to anybody else. And the other thing is I could never treat gay people like they are perversions of society. You know, when you really sift through Watchtower publications, you might be surprised to see just how cruel and demeaning they have been towards gay members of our society. Let me just show you some examples of what I'm talking about here. We can see all the different Watchtower and Awake publications where this has come from, and see how they describe homosexuality as something abhorrent, sexually degrading, unnatural, sordid, sexual perversions that are unnatural, sick and perverted, gruesome, violent and downright sadistic, disgraceful, worthy of the death penalty, perverted, detestable, vile, and repulsive. You know, this is the kind of thing that I was indoctrinated with from infancy. To this day, I find myself having to fight against such narrow-minded, hateful thinking. And, you know, the organization has really said way too much about homosexuality. Like almost every religion, they seem to be preoccupied with sex. You know, how you can't touch anybody down there unless they're of the opposite sex and only if you're married. And even when you're married, there has to be an approved way, you know, like the missionary position. You can't even touch yourself, which is kind of funny, unless you're washing. Check out this meme that I found. I didn't create it, but I thought it was good for a laugh.
What? I think it's disgusting.
And check out this very interesting clip I found of Richard Dawkins and what he had to say about this.
Imagine the idea that the creator of the universe, the architect of the laws of physics and the constants of physics, the designer of the expanding universe, has knowledge of everything, knowledge of physics, knowledge of relativity, quantum physics, everything in his giant brain. But what he really cares about is the sex of the person you're going to get with. I mean, how petty, how trivial a mind it is that can think that.
You know, it's really funny that JW.org makes such a big deal out of sex, especially when they have no idea what the future holds on sex and about people's sexual orientation. For example, right now, JW.org believes that the angels and the 144,000 are sexless. And they have flip-flopped since pretty much the 1930s on whether or not when people are resurrected, whether or not they will be able to marry and have children. Take a look at this clip here from the 1930s, actually it was from 1930, and see how at this point they were very definite that you would not be able to have children in the New World. You know, I love this citation because I've used it before in other videos of mine. But see what the answer is from this Golden Age 1930. It says, the scriptures do not reveal what the relationship of men and women will be after the resurrection is completed. The most that we know is that there will be no children born during the last 100 years of the millennium, nor any born after that, because men and women do not have children after they reach the age of 100 years. Whether the identity of the sexes as such will be preserved, we do not know. There have been some well-authenticated instances in which women have been transformed into men, and it is possible that this transformation may become general and we shall all be brothers together. So, and I've put there the citation of the scripture from Isaiah 65 verse 20, where it says, no more will there be an infant from that place who lives but a few days, nor an old man who fails to live out his days. For anyone who dies at 100 will be considered a mere boy, and the sinner will be cursed even though he is 100 years of age. So I'm not sure why they're so dogmatic about what they said about children not being born after 100, and there definitely will not be children being born. That scripture, I don't know. I don't get that from that scripture, but that's just me. So since that Golden Age article, they have flip-flopped at least 5 times about whether people will marry and whether they will have children in their publications. And I'm going to show you what they are saying now from a 2014 Watchtower. So what I've highlighted there says, is there sound reason for hoping that resurrected ones will be able to marry? Put simply, the answer is that we cannot say. And this is really what their stand should have been all along. And in fact, several decades ago, it was that they didn't know. But then they started forming opinions and say you would have kids, you would marry, you wouldn't, you would, you wouldn't. It just kept flip-flopping. And now they're basically back to where they were from several decades ago, that they don't know. But they still do go with the idea that at least childbearing will end in the New World at some point, because they'll tell you that, you know, having kids, eventually the world is going to be filled with people. And at some point, this is going to have to end. But you notice in all their publications, they still show pictures of a paradise filled with young children, because they know that this appeals to people and this is what they want to show everybody. But, you know, if God will need to remove the desire for sex, then it really matters little whether a person is gay or whether they're straight. And, you know, they like to say that Jehovah's standards never change. In fact, this is what they said in a recent video of theirs, the One Man, One Woman video that they presented for children. Let's have a look.
Jehovah created Adam and Eve, male and female. Then in Genesis 2:24, he said that a man will stick to his wife. Later, Jesus said the same thing. Jehovah's standards haven't changed.
But is what she said true? Or is the organization being deceitful here? I mean, what about all the years where Jehovah allowed polygamy? We had faithful ones of old, like Abraham and David, who had multiple wives. So it looks like God's standards can change. Perhaps they should rename this video One Man, Several Women, and Concubines. Notice too that she says in the video that Jesus reaffirmed God's standards. But an interesting point to note is that Jesus actually never discussed homosexuality in the Bible, and he certainly never condemned them. So to further our discussion today, the surprise I mentioned at the beginning of the video is that I have a very good friend of mine here today who is going to talk further about this. She recently, in fact, did her first video where she bravely came out and told her story of abuse within the Jehovah's Witnesses organization. Trisha was raised as a JW, and as a young woman, she came out as gay and confided this information to her mother, who then immediately betrayed her confidence and told the elders. And then, of course, they wanted to help her by forming a judicial committee, which we're going to hear all about in today's discussion. So please welcome Trisha Frangigna. Hey, hi Trisha. Thanks so much for wanting to be on the show with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, this is great. So please get comfortable because this won't hurt much. We just want to ask you a few questions so we can get to know you better.
All right.
And okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first question I guess I'd like to ask you is, so when did you first know that you were gay?
Well, consciously, probably not till I was around 20. But keep in mind that being a Jehovah's Witness kid, the concept of sexuality or homosexuality is pretty much non-existent until you start hearing about what an abomination it is. So, like, even though a lot of LGBT people can relate to self-identifying early in life, I didn't, because it was more of a gradual realization for me, because people didn't talk about those things around me, and it wasn't a concept, so it couldn't be a reality for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that maybe things might have been different if you weren't raised as a JW?
I think that it could have been different in the sense that I could have been more comfortable with my sexuality sooner in my life if I wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. But at the same time, it's hard to tell because I made another video that talked about this, but I had kind of a unique unique circumstances in my childhood that kind of left me very disassociated mentally and emotionally for a very long time. So it's hard to say. I try not to think about the could have beens very much, but I all I know is I am who I am now, and I'm happy for that.
Yeah, your video, I found it was just so emotional to watch it. It's just hard to imagine that, all the elders knew about you being abused. And as you mentioned, so many people within the congregation knew that you were being abused. And yet no one did anything. And you were just a child. It's and I found it just so courageous of you to put out your video and to tell us your story, because I've never seen anything else like that. I'm not saying there isn't. I don't know. I haven't done a massive research, but I haven't seen at least anybody who was a Jehovah's Witness explaining their experience the way you had. So thank you.
Yeah, that's why I did it. I don't know of anyone who's done it before either, but it was hard. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, but I'm glad I did it.
Good. Yeah. No, I think it can help a lot of people. You'd mentioned before that you first came out to your mother, who was also a witness. Now, what was her reaction when you mentioned this all to her?
Well, I started by telling her that I entered into another relationship with a woman, and then I started crying and tearfully told her that I thought I was gay, and wasn't crying because I was ashamed of it. I had already come to terms with the fact that I didn't think that it was shameful, anything to be ashamed for. But I was crying because I knew I could lose my family, so I was really afraid to tell her. At the time, though, she didn't react in a particularly negative way. She's kind of non-emotional about it, but she didn't tell me she accepted me either. But I ended up leaving her house and just thinking, oh, that wasn't so bad. But little did I know that as soon as I left, she contacted the elders about it.
Yeah, in the organization, you can't have any privacy. Anytime you have any confidential talk between you and someone else, they immediately feel compelled to tell the elders. But the problem is some of these elders tell their wives, and then they tell their friends, and before you know it, half the congregation knows all about your business.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I find that for gay people, this can create even more problems within the congregation as well, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later. Sweetie. Okay, sweetheart. Yeah, we got to keep that. So, why did you want to make this video then?
Well, I think there's a lot of coming out videos on the internet, but you have such a gift for information gathering and presenting it in a way that makes people laugh and makes people think, like in a constructive way. So I really wanted to do this with you because I want people to think about this issue from a logical and really a humanistic standpoint, because people need to realize that it's really not fair to ask someone to be something they're not, or to ask someone to make a choice to put aside who they are as some act of loyalty. And like, to me, I think of it as a mother who bakes her kids two cakes, one chocolate and one vanilla. And she says to her kids, I just love you guys so much that today I made you 2 cakes, and you can pick whichever one you want. But if you choose the vanilla one, I'll be really hurt and I'm going to kill you. Like, that's basically the message that we get. I like the witnesses and some other religions, really, they really say, oh, you can be gay, but you just can't practice being gay. If you practice being gay, then you're going to die at Armageddon.
Yeah.
It's essentially the same idea. And to me, that seems pretty sociopathic.
Yeah, it's that whole concept of, free will. They say you've got free will, but if you don't choose the way they want you to choose, then they're going to kill you. I mean, it's like, well, that's not a choice. The choice, is not there for me at all, right? I either do it or I die. So,
yeah.
Yeah. So were you ever attracted to guys? Like, did you ever try to date any guys at all?
Yeah, I dated a couple of guys briefly. I can appreciate a good-looking guy. I can look at a guy and be like, "Oh, that's a good-looking man right there." But for me, I never connected with them. My true attraction and connection comes with being with women.
Yeah. Did you ever try to pray the gay away?
Yeah, I think that I did a lot while I was still a witness, but obviously that didn't work for me.
Yeah. So, okay, so tell us about your first relationship then.
Well, my first gay relationship, I guess I could say that it was with another JW girl, actually. Uh, it was unexpected, and we both just suddenly fell for each other and immediately fell into this cycle of feeling like such an overwhelming sense of connection and intimacy with each other, and then just immense guilt because we were taught that it's wrong and that we had to make a choice between feeling a certain way and being loyal to Jehovah. So it was actually quite an unhealthy cycle to be in, and it lasted about 3 years for me. So for the two of us going back and forth like that. Mm-hmm.
So where is she now?
She's still a witness, and she married a witness man like shortly after I was disfellowshipped. They're still active witnesses, and they're still married. That was about 10 years ago.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're not supposed to talk because I'm disfellowshipped, but over the years we have kind of touched base a couple of times, and the sense that I get from her is that she has some internal struggles, I believe, about it, but she says she's happy, and I can only hope that's true.
Yeah. I just feel kind of sad when I think about people like her because, I mean, let's face it takes a very strong person to be able to come out and say who you really are, especially, I mean, it's hard enough to get out of the Jehovah's Witnesses organization as it is with all the shunning that can happen to you, but to be a gay Jehovah's Witness, it's even that much harder. So, and it's, not everyone is able to do that, you know, and I don't blame them, but I think it's just too bad that people can't be who they really are, you know.
Yeah.
But okay, so then how did the congregation handle it? So your mother now has gone to the elders. Now what happened after that?
Well, within the week they formed a judicial committee. So the judicial process is actually quite traumatic process in its own.
Yeah.
You're essentially standing trial for your moral sins in front of a panel of 3 men, and asking you very inappropriate questions. And in my case, they were asking me questions like how many times we had sex, who did what to who, like exactly how many times I climaxed, how many times she climaxed, all the time with the Bible sitting over their laps, you know, like hiding who knows what. It was very, very disturbing. But I answered them. I feel like, well, I didn't answer all the questions. At some point, I was like, I don't understand why you need to know all this. I already told you, you know, I had sex, and but no, they kept pressing, and eventually they just asked me, am I going to quit being gay? And I said, I don't think I can just quit being gay. And they said, you know, like, we don't even need you to leave the room. You'll be disfellowshipped, and you have a week to say goodbye to all your friends and family that you've ever had before they publicly named me, right? So it's almost like a public shunning. And by the time they announce it, usually everyone's gossiped enough that they all know it's coming, and they all know what you're being disfellowshipped for. Mm-hmm. So it was quite a traumatic experience that I don't wish on anybody, but unfortunately happens to so many people for ridiculous reasons. They could go through that for smoking a cigarette, so.
No, they couldn't just let you go quietly. I mean, you were prepared, from what I recall you saying to me before, you were prepared to just leave quietly. You didn't have to be disfellowshipped. You weren't going to live a double life. You weren't trying to be somebody you're not, a phony. You were, but they're not prepared for that. They have to make this big deal and humiliate you and have you lose your entire family and everybody that you love.
And I remember saying those goodbyes to some of my family members, like my favorite aunts. I loved them so much. Just growing up, I just admired them so much. And I would say we were very close, but when I told them I was being disfellowshipped, all they could say was, well, I hope you respect Jehovah's arrangement and never contact me again.
Oh, yeah. I had that too. I had, when I got the boot, similar things. I mean, it's funny, it didn't bother me at the time when people, I had like best friends telling me, just do what you're going to do, like as if you're just a piece of crap, and I actually understood it because I was expecting the shunning. Once I got disfellowshipped, I knew I was going to be shunned. And so I didn't expect anything otherwise. But my mother, who's still in the organization, she's the one who said to me, wow, boy, your so-called friends sure were quick to, just turn their back.
Yeah.
So, okay, so then now you've been disfellowshipped. How did you feel now after all this happened? Like, where did you basically go from there?
Well, when I was first disfellowshipped, I think I went through quite a depression at first, but I think that was mostly related to the fact that I would, even though they weren't supposed to be talking to me, my family would send me like guilt-ridden emails after email after email, just reminding me that this was my choice to leave them, not their choice to cut me off, but my choice to leave them and Jehovah, and just like, telling me, how unnatural and believing that I was happy before when I wasn't. And that really kind of just spiraled me into a depression. But over time, I was able to build my self-confidence up and my own identity, really. And I felt like I was myself for the very first time ever.
Good. I mean, I like to think of it as they did us a favor, because let's face it, we were in a cult. It's too bad they couldn't just let us go quietly. But for me, I needed the wake-up call. That's what woke me up, was the cruel shunning. I couldn't believe people I was willing to bend over backwards for could just cast me off like an old shoe overnight, like literally overnight. And that's what woke me up. But in the end, I view it as they did me a favor. I don't want people like that in my life. And it got me out of a cult.
Yeah, exactly. Best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah. So then where did you turn afterwards then? How did you start getting on with your life again?
Well, I was really lucky because, like I had mentioned to you before, I did plan on kind of fading away. And I was inactive for a while before I got disfellowshipped. So in that time, I built up a community for myself on the outside. I joined this martial arts club and made some really good friends there and found myself a healthy outlet. And yeah, so it's not that I wasn't like thrown in without knowing anybody. I kind of prepared myself for that, I guess you could say. But also I was really lucky because my girlfriend at the time, she and her family really took me under their wings and just showed me what a real family looked like and what real unconditional love was. And they were there for me through the worst of times. And I'm forever thankful to them. I'm still close to them, even though we've both moved on to other relationships and moved on with our lives. I still see them. I'm still very close to all of them. So.
Nice.
And that's what family is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know. I say thank goodness for worldly people, for the unconditional love that they are able to show us. It's so funny that we were taught to keep these kinds of people away from us our whole lives, only to realize that these people actually do love. And they are
Yes.
willing to be like Jesus and forgive others and not judge them. You know,
Yes, I say all the time that I found there to be so much more compassion and kindness in the world than I ever found in the organization.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. And I hear the same thing over and over again, you know. So what would your response be to those who say that your lifestyle is unnatural?
I would just encourage them to do some actual research, some scientific research. There's lots of it. Think from a logical perspective, because, well, even if they want to think from a spiritual perspective, if you believe in God, then you believe that God's perfect and he doesn't make mistakes, right? But just look at nature. Like, if God doesn't make mistakes, then why did he make hundreds of other species that exhibit homosexual tendencies? Like, it just shows to me that if you believe in God, that he respects our diversity, that he created us to be diverse in nature. So I don't know, that's a kind of an undisputable fact that really woke me up to it, the fact that it couldn't be unnatural.
Yeah.
You see it everywhere in the natural world, right?
You do. You do, for sure. Do you believe that somebody can be gay and be a JW?
No. even though JWs will tell you frequently, oh, you know, we accept everybody, we're not homophobic, we accept gay people open-heartedly, they just can't practice being gay. I think I touched on that before. And so you can be a gay Jehovah's Witness, but you can't experience life with love in it.
Yeah. No, it's I almost wonder if they're copying the Mormons with this, because I know they've copied the Mormons on other occasions as well, the JW org. But because that's what they've been saying for the last little while too, that you can be a Mormon and still be in good standing, but you cannot practice it. And I noticed that JW org is starting to say that too, because for years they'd say that people don't, it's a lifestyle choice. And now they're starting to realize that maybe it isn't a choice. Maybe people are born with these tendencies. That's what they're starting to figure out, which the rest of the world knew like for the last few decades. But they're starting to agree that maybe there is something different about these ones, you know? But the bottom line is you can't
the Mormon church, right?
Yeah, the Mormon church. And now the JW org is starting. I noticed that they're starting to say that too. I don't know. But the whole thing of not being able to act on it to me is just totally nuts. So, I mean,
yeah, that's not accepting. No.
Yeah, no, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on as well. But so was the fact that you were gay the only reason that you left the JW organization, or were there any other factors involved?
There were several other factors. First, I struggled with the JW concept of paradise. It wasn't appealing to me because I thought about being in a perfect world with people who all thought the same way, believed the same way, were always happy. And sure, in theory, always being happy sounds awesome. But when you actually break it down and think about it, like, isn't that the beauty of humanity, be able to experience a range of emotions? And how do you know if you're happy if you're never anything but happy? So
you're insane. It's called insanity.
Yeah, and like the thought of everyone just walking around happy, thinking the same way, just kind of made me think robots, right? And so that didn't really appeal to me myself. So how can I be out in service trying to sell that to people outside, right? But also when I talk about the preaching work, like I had a hard time answering a lot of questions. And of course, we weren't able to do our own research on the outside. God forbid we do that. So any questions I had, I would go to the elders for answers, and they they could never really answer me. They just told me, you got to spend more time in service doing it. Just teach yourself by teaching others, but don't do any research. So that's what I did. I pioneered for a while. I kept doing that, and none of my questions were answered. So that was another thing. And then another big thing was the shunning. That never ever sat well with me. And then a friend of mine was disfellowshipped. And I remember a big wake-up moment for me was her grandmother had died, who she was extremely close to and did everything for. And at her funeral, you know, when people walk by in procession and give their condolences to the family at the end, well, everybody walked right by her as if she wasn't even there, and gave their condolences to everybody else. And oh man, that just didn't sit well for me at all. I just thought that's so unnatural, so unloving. Like, at least acknowledge her, you know? So I remember after that, saying to my sister that at this upcoming summer convention, if I don't feel like it's the truth, if I'm still having doubts and questions, that I don't think I'm going to be a witness anymore. And I went to the convention, and the concluding talk, like, everybody was clapping and applauding the speaker, clapping and applauding over the imminent death and destruction of everybody but us. Like, I just sat there just feeling like it was so wrong, and everyone around me was so happy and excited. Yeah. So after that, I didn't go back, and it was not long after that I met my ex and got disfellowshipped.
Didn't you say, I remember you said something to me when you were at the Judicial Committee, and you were saying, well, remember I had some questions that I never really got answers to from you. And yeah, their response was back?
They said, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about your sex life.
So, that's so funny. It's like, which is, of course, much more interesting.
And for me, because I was still kind of like, I didn't believe in the religion, but this was still kind of a normal construct to me, being in this meeting. I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know?
We just go along with it. I remember the same thing. Whatever they asked, because I'm an honest person.
Yeah.
You don't realize until afterwards, you go, well, that wasn't normal. Like, what kinds of questions were those? I actually respect a lot. I had there was an old brother-in-law I had years ago, and when he was 16 or so, he knocked up a girl in my hall. And he wasn't baptized, but she was. And he had to go to it. Well, he went to a judicial committee. And he said they were asking the same kind of inappropriate questions that they asked you. You know, who was on top? How many fingers did you use? Who climaxed first? Like, ridiculous questions that you definitely do not have to ask.
Why do you need to know that? No, no way. No,
and he just goes, you blanking perverts. And he just got up and left. And I thought, when he told me who the elders were, I was shocked, because I thought these guys were very meek and mild, and they're asking such disgusting questions, you know?
And they ask it in a manner that's very meek and mild, you would say, too. You know, they just sit there calmly. Now tell me.
Who was on
how many fingers did you use, you know? Like,
oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's insane. Yeah. When you think about it now, it's insane. But at the time, we just smiled and nodded and, did what we were told. I don't know. But I don't know. Yeah, so just back to what we were saying before, that when you come out as gay within the congregation, the whole congregation finds out. I mean, I say come out, sorry. You only tell one person, like your mother, and somehow everyone's going to find out. And let's just take a best case scenario when you're not acting upon it. It happens to get out that, you might be inclined that way. Everyone makes your business their business, and everyone's going to be blabbing it all over the world. And what it means for somebody who is gay, unfortunately, which it adds a whole new element to it, which I never thought of until I researched for this video with you, is that it basically means a life of alone.
Yeah, well, not only does it cause problems from an emotional or, romantic perspective, but it causes issues socially and financially, because if you're a gay witness, you can't even have a roommate, for example, because the elders, if they won't want you living with someone with the same sex, right? And they won't want you living with someone of the opposite sex for appearance purposes, like it looks bad. Yeah. So you're kind of stuck on your own, and that can cause a big issue for a young adult living in an expensive city, having no roommates.
Totally.
It creates all sorts of barriers.
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy. It's like you can't even go on vacation with anyone for all the reasons that we just discussed.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you're a JW brother, then they keep you away from everybody. They keep you away from their kids, like you're some sort of pedophile, because, well, that's what their publications teach, that pedophiles are gay, so gays are pedophiles, even though experts have confirmed that this isn't necessarily the case. And then you also have to hear from the platform constantly that your actions are detestable to God, that you'll have to be fixed in the new world if you even make it to the new world, because they also say that being gay is worthy of death. So it's a constant struggle for a JW witness to think, am I going to die? Am I going to have to be fixed?
Dark cloud following you around everywhere.
I'm normal. I'm disgusting to my God. It's not. Yeah. That's why I say it's not really possible to be gay and a Jehovah's Witness.
No, I can't imagine having to hear that from the platform all the time, and knowing how people feel, and knowing that if you are gay male, like you said, that people are going to view you as a pedophile. And you know what's weird is I'm glad you brought that up, because for years I thought that too, because it's stuck in the. I never really. It's hard to say. I just know it was stuck in the back of my head, and I brought it up just recently when I was doing research for this video, and I mentioned it to a few people about pedophiles being homosexuals, and they looked at me like I was crazy. And I thought, well, that's what I learned, right? That's what the JW organization teaches. So yeah. I've had to try to get these thoughts out of my head too, because when you research it, you realize that pedophiles are not attracted to adults. They're attracted, they're not homosexuals. They're not attracted to adult men or adult women. They're attracted to children, and it's a sickness. It's a sicko thing. It's not normal to do this, especially what they do to these children. It's not a mutual relationship. It's more like a rape, and so it just shows how sick the whole thing is. So you can't compare the two at all. Okay, no, my love. Hey, it's my little guy. And but don't you find it bizarre too that they go out of their way to warn people about someone who may be gay in their congregation, but when they know that there's a pedophile in their congregation, they seem to go out of their way to sweep it under the rug? I mean, this is just so bizarre. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. I feel like, well, my theory is that pedophilia is a crime, and they don't want their members to know the corruption that exists by letting these crimes occur in the congregation. The congregation members are supposed to be the cleanest on earth. So, letting them know that crimes are happening, all over the place in all these congregations, that's something that I think they would want to hide. But when it comes to being gay, that's not a crime. So they can kind of easier put that on an individual.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's like they're okay with throwing a gay person under the bus. It's like they're saying, look how clean we are. We're a very moral organization. We don't allow this kind of thing. But then they have all these pedophiles that you find out about. Like look what happened to the Royal Australian Commission, 1,000 cases. And that's, who knows how many people were molested.
And that's just in Australia.
Yeah, that's just Australia. Yeah. It's insane. But it really reminds me what Jesus said about this when he talked about whitewashed graves. They have this appearance of being clean on the outside, but inside they're full of dead men's bones and all the disgusting things that they're hiding. But what's weird about it too is that it's not just gay people that would have a difficult time if you were a Jehovah's Witness and were gay at the same time. When I was a witness, I was married to a man, which is considered normal in their eyes. But my husband wasn't doing much for the organization at all. He was very much a deadbeat in every way. But, so he wouldn't be at meetings and he wouldn't be at service. And people were always asking me, where's your husband? Feeling bad for me in the pity party. And they wouldn't invite you over. So it was difficult because you're not fitting the mold of what they want. And what they want is basically an elder husband and a wife who's a pioneer, who's, reaching out. And I wasn't fitting in that mold. So it's difficult for people like that as well. But it's also difficult for a single sister, because if you're a single sister, there's always this idea that, once you reach the age of like 25 or so, they start thinking, maybe she's not going to find her brother right. She's desperate to get married, but she may have to wait for the new world, Yeah. In fact, let's take a look at this clip and see how JW.org depicts single women in the organization.
Life is kind of lonely right now. All of my friends got married and seem so happy. What if I never find someone? I cannot believe it even crossed my mind to date a non-witness or even look at those JW dating sites and put my integrity at stake. Imagine what I could have gotten myself into. My singleness indeed allows me to serve Jehovah without distraction. I just love my life. An invitation to the School for Kingdom Evangelizers. Yes, Jehovah really did not hold back anything good from me.
I actually hadn't seen this clip before you showed it to me, but I couldn't help but think she could have had all those same opportunities, whether she was married or whether she was single. I don't understand why they're equating it to the blessings of being single, but if she was married, she could have went to Bethel, she could have been invited to the circuit work, she could have been a missionary, she could have been in the missionary position. Like, all of that's possible, or more possible if you're married. So
it's crazy. I know. And it was actually, I found the sad piano music in the background was, I don't know, it didn't make you feel like you wanted to be single. It made you feel like how pathetic. I don't know.
It's like someone died. Yeah.
I mean, marriage is not the end all be all. There's nothing wrong with being single. I'm not putting that down at all. For some people, they're not able to find someone and you want to or they just don't want to get married. There's no reason why you should have to feel you have to get married. You can be perfectly happy to be single. But the problem with being gay in the organization is that when you're a single person who's a heterosexual, you have the prospect of getting married if you want to. But when you're gay, there's no hope at all. You have to remain single. You have to remain alone. You have to remain loveless. It doesn't make any sense at all. And keep in mind that all this, wisdom is coming from an organization that has had some very erroneous ideas about homosexuality. Check out, for example, what they said in the youth book about homosexuality. This is a book that I grew up with. It's Your Youth Getting the Best Out of It. Notice where I've got the arrows there. It says, in fact, masturbation can lead into homosexuality. In such instances, the person not satisfied with his lonely sexual activity seeks a partner for mutual sex play. It's like they're really stating these erroneous views as if they're facts, when there's nothing to back it up. There's no scriptures, there's no studies to back it up. But I'll tell you what I did find that were there actual studies done. When I did a bit of research, I looked on Wikipedia, for example, and I found that there's all kinds of studies done about just how many men masturbate. And what they found was about 92 to 97% of men claimed that they had masturbated. And yet, we don't see 92 to 97% of the population as gay. So it's more like, I don't know, I'm just, from what I've seen, around 5%. It could be even as high as 10%. But it's nowhere near 92 or 97. So they're way off.
Well, they're also way off base in terms of discussing sexual matters just in general. Have you seen that clip of Toni Morris talking about tight pants? Oh. Obsession with tight pants and how the homosexuals created, I don't know, do you have it?
You know what, I do. Let's have a look at it.
Okay.
What's wrong is this extremely tight pants. It's not appropriate for a Christian. And I want you brothers to think about this. Do you remember that many homosexuals are in the clothing industry and doing the designing? Don't you know they love it when you're wearing tight pants? Oh yeah, you chuckle. I don't think it's funny. I think it's disgusting.
And the other one that needs addressing is for these young fellas, because the older ones aren't doing much of it, thankfully. It's the metrosexual look. We've addressed that in the past. We've said things about it. But what's happened now, it's really caught on more. Now, metrosexual, that's the tight suit jacket and the tight pants, better known as tight pants. And they are tight, I mean tight, all the way down to the ankles. And that is not modest, brothers. No. It's not appropriate. It's not sound of mind. And I was proud of one circuit overseer who told me this past summer at one of the international conventions, because he brought it up. One of these fellas shows up for his circuit overseer visit, and he wants to go out to ministry, work with him door to door, and he's wearing tight pants. And the circuit overseer was man enough, spiritual man enough to say, no, I'm not going door to door with you. Not with that dress on. Inappropriate.
It's absolutely crazy. And did you notice that those were actually two different clips that we saw? I mean, Tony Morris is on some kind of a world tour where he's telling everyone about tight pants and homosexuals. I mean, there's so many things happening in the world, like people dying of hunger and people dying of wars and dying from all kinds of illnesses and all kinds of things. And JW.org does nothing for all of these things. They just sit by and wait for some, magical thing to happen in the near future, or so-called near future. And yet what really matters are these tight pants.
Yeah.
What's wrong is this extremely tight pants.
So, what are your thoughts when you see that?
It's funny. It's funny how the governing body takes so much pride in the fact that they don't go beyond the things that are written. But show me in the Bible where it says anything about tight pants. Like that's going way beyond the scriptures. And if you are a Bible reader or you're a creationalist, then you believe in the story of Adam and Eve. I'm pretty sure that they were prancing about naked. So wearing tight pants is actually an improvement. Yeah. But the whole thing goes beyond funny to just being inappropriate when he goes on to relate an experience of this circuit overseer that he's so proud of, because the circuit overseer sent this brother home, this grown man home, to change because he didn't want to be seen in service with him because of his tight pants. Because someone might think they're gay. So he sends this grown man home to change, and Tony Morris is like, everyone should be like that. Yeah. We should all demonstrate the fine example of this brother. Like, how is that a loving, accepting organization when you send an adult home to change because you don't want people to think you're gay together?
I know, it's sheer craziness when you see something like that. And this is so important. These tight pants are so important to Tony Morris that they even change what the circuit overseer talks about when he meets with the elders and the ministerial servants. Check it out here, where I've put the arrows there. Notice it says, please note 2 areas of concern among brothers. 1, the tendency to dress in the so-called metrosexual style, which usually includes tight-fitting jackets and pants that highlight the body. And 2, the manifesting of effeminate traits, perhaps in one's bearing, body language, and manner of speech. And then where the other arrows are at the bottom, it says, any individual who manifests the aforementioned extremes in dress and grooming, or who displays gender-blurring characteristics, should not be recommended for Bethel service or the school for kingdom evangelizers. Furthermore, if the body of elders agrees that a brother or sister is blatantly and deliberately ignoring repeated counsel, and his or her dress and grooming is disturbing to the congregation, the elders may determine that the person no longer qualifies to share in the ministry. In such rare cases, no announcement will be made to the congregation.
Inappropriate.
And time and time again, JW.org goes way beyond the scriptures, and they show that they really have no understanding of the issues. Look what they said here, for example, about people who are transgenders. This is from a Bethel guidebook called the Correspondence Guidelines on page 98. Notice where I've highlighted in the second column. It says, if an individual considers undergoing a sex change operation, basically to bring the appearance of the sex organs into line with what the individual emotionally and mentally feels himself or herself to be, that one should be advised to live in accord with the biological facts of the situation. Someone desiring to be baptized who has already undergone a mutilating operation of this sort, in brackets a transsexual, would be expected to take his or her place in life, in accord with what the individual biologically is, not in accord with what the person has been mutilated to appear to be. This may even require that the person leave a mate to whom the person is married, since the mutilated one is actually biologically of the same sex as the mate.
I find that really disturbing. Like, where's the empathy for anyone in these circumstances? And notice that there's no scriptures cited in that. The only backup is their own policy in their own books. There's nothing scriptural cited.
Exactly. This reminds me of the biblical account of the Ethiopian eunuch. He asked Philip what prevented him from getting baptized. Did Philip spout off a bunch of man-made rules? Did he try to force him to go back to being someone he wasn't? Nope. And he was baptized right then and there.
Imagine growing up as a teenager and constantly being told that you're not normal, that the desires you're having are an abomination, are detestable to Jehovah, and realizing that you'll never get to enjoy love, enjoy sex, enjoy family life. This is a serious concern when you consider the alarming statistics on just how many JWs or ex-JWs are committing suicide.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing, I mean, at that age, too, when you're a teenager, you don't even really know how you feel. You're just coming to terms with how you're feeling, and you're being told that you're a horrible person. I can't imagine how you would really feel. And wasn't there something in that children's video, that Caleb and Sophia one, that really bothered you? I can't remember what it was, though.
It showed this man with his luggage at the security gate in the airport, and they were relating it to entering paradise. This man had to just drop his suitcase off and leave it there so that he could proceed through security. But what was so disturbing about that is then they suggested that the suitcase was a gay partner. Like, just leave it at the gate and come into paradise. Like, imagine if this was a married couple or a couple that had spent so many years together, and just say, oh, well, ditch your husband, ditch your wife, and come on in. That was really disturbing to me.
It's an insane comparison.
Yeah, just likening the relationship to some garbage you can leave behind.
Why don't we just have a look at it so everybody in the audience here can see what we're talking about?
At Matthew 7:13 and 14, it talks about the road leading to paradise. To get there, Jehovah says we have to leave some things behind. That means anything Jehovah doesn't approve of.
I mean, it is just so crazy. Only an organization that is truly devoid of love would compare banned products from an airplane to a human being and then show them just being dumped off like a pile of garbage. But at least the organization is showing their true colors and how they really view their members.
Jehovah discards the person like a piece of garbage.
Wasn't there also a clip of Toni Morris talking about how detestable gay marriage is?
Yes, that's right. Hang on just a second. I think I might have it handy.
I don't know if you know the news, but my wife has a lot of Irish content. And she's a bit upset when I broke it to her that in Ireland, first country, to have a popular vote approving same-sex marriage. So her Irish was coming up out of her there a bit. I won't go beyond that, as I have to go home later.
Yeah, so do you have any thoughts on this clip?
Oh, well, I can't understand why people like his wife have such a problem with people experiencing love who are happy. They're not hurting anybody. Like, what would the alternative be? The alternative would be that gay people live the rest of their lives alone simply to satisfy people like Toni Morris's life who have a problem with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly what I thought too. Contemporary standards have changed in our at least in the Western world. In the 1950s, you had women that were in the workplace, but they weren't able to do the same jobs that you didn't see women pilots or women doctors, and if you ever did, they weren't paid the same amount as what men were being paid for the exact same job. And, even Jeffrey Jackson admitted that contemporary standards have changed from when the Bible was written. Because I remember at the Royal Commission, they were talking about they were showing scriptures about the rod of discipline and whether that actually meant a physical rod. And he agreed. He says, yes, I believe in Bible times it did mean a physical rod. But today we don't believe it's a physical rod anymore. So it's a good thing that contemporary standards have changed. Throughout history, people have been using the Bible to oppress others. They've used it to oppress women. They've used it to oppress people of different races. They've used it to oppress people of different cultures. And they've used it to oppress homosexuals. But, contrary to what JW.org tries to teach, a person does not choose to be gay. This is something that they are born with. And even JW.org is slowly, like the Mormons, that they seem to be copying in many areas, they seem to be realizing this too. And yet all the bigoted, berating statements that they make towards homosexual people does nothing to try to actually change a person who does feel this way. And, the one thing that I will say from all the different people that I know, and certainly from my own experience, is that life gets better and better when you're away from this organization. And I'm sure, no doubt, you can attest to this as well.
Oh, definitely. When you're true to yourself and you're able to be authentic to yourself and not fear or not going to hiding who you really are, life just is so much more enjoyable when you're free to do that.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. That was your experience as well, because I know it was very difficult for you. And listening to your story and everything that you've been through, and I'm sure you learned a lot about yourself as well. But, the only alternative for you, would be to remain in an organization like that, repent and say what, I don't know what you're going to say when you repent. I don't feel this way anymore, or I do
I'm sorry for being gay.
Yeah, but I'm not going to live that way. So then you're going to spend the rest of your life alone, without any love, without any prospects of love, watching everyone around you get married while you're single, knowing that people are making fun of you. Mocking you and getting on with their lives and excluding you. That's the prospect of being a Jehovah's Witness and being gay. And it's just basically an impossibility to have to live that way. But anyways, I want to thank you again for wanting to do this video with me. I'm so glad we were able to do it together. And I hope we were able to help people as well. And with, watching experiences like yours is certainly going to be encouraging for other people as well.
Yeah, thanks for talking with me about it. Can't wait to see the rest.
Yeah, so thank you all for watching our video today, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
Oh, yeah. You chuckle. I don't think it's funny. I think it's disgusting.
People can change.